Okay, I just want to give everybody a heads up on the new dense mode spec. The last version that you may have seen on the mailing list was numbered new version 2.02. That did not make it into the Internet Drafts Directory, but we hope to get that fixed soon. Previous version that was on the mailing list was new version 2.04. And that's the one that's on your web page right now. So there's a little bit of confusion on versions. The next version that goes out will actually make it into the Internet Drafts Directory, and it will start over at 00 because it's never been submitted before. So when you see that come out, and you see it as 00, it's probably going to be really this latest one that was on the mailing list, but it'll be renumbered again. So just a heads up there. There are a couple issues that I wanted to make sure the dense mode spec guys know, and that's that we had a PIM authentication draft that is gone now because that stuff's been folded into the sparse mode spec. That stuff also has to be folded into the dense mode spec. And we had a V6 draft. That stuff got folded into the sparse mode spec. So equally, it has to get folded into the dense mode spec as well. And I'm sure Brian will be glad to help you there if you need some help. The dense mode spec has not, according to the authors, not got a lot of review comments back. We can't take it, we can't advance this in the ITF without some review from the working group. We need people who are interested in the spec to go over it and find detail. So if you have an interest in seeing this thing actually go to proposed and draft standard, please read it, okay? And let's get some working group participation. Okay, thanks. With that, Jonathan's going to come up and talk about the latest version that went to the mailing list.
Okay. Can I be heard? Okay, I guess so. I'd like to apologize for screwing up the version numbers. I'm sure it's going to lead to much confusion later. Essentially, what we're going to talk about is the changes since the last round in London. And the major changes really are that we incorporated all the stuff from the state refresh draft into the PIM dense mode draft. So that's all one big coherent piece of work. We also added scope boundary rules because for PIM dense mode, if there's a scope boundary for a particular group, you want to be able to take the appropriate prune action rather than continue to have those messages flood down. We plugged a couple of holes in the assert rules in the previous draft. We added the land prune delay option from the PIM sparse mode spec, and we made a number of corrections in clarifying text and fixing some typos. For the state refresh, we added an originator state machine for a router that's adjacent to a source. We added the state refresh hello option to the hello description, and we modified the assert rules to this for the state refresh. We made the router failure recovery parts of the state refresh specification optional. That really, it wasn't clear to us exactly whether that should be mandatory, so we just left it as optional. And because in our main PIM draft, the previous PIM dense mode drafts said that prunes and asserts should be rate limited, but it wasn't very clear to what extent they should be rate limited. So in our draft, we made very specific rules about how they should be rate limited, which kind of were overlapping with the assert override flag and the prune now flag from the state refresh. So essentially, we folded those in, and when a ROTR receives state refresh with those flags, it essentially ignores them and just pays attention to its assert timer, but it does send them downstream for backwards compatibility. As far as remaining work is concerned on this, we need to review the security more thoroughly. As was said for the BSR, we're not security experts, and so we'd really like to have some security people review that in more detail. We'd also like some feedback on what sort of maximum graft retries we should have. If you don't receive a graft acknowledgement, essentially right now we have an infinite number of retries, which doesn't seem intrinsically wise, but it's not clear what we should do if we don't get a graft acknowledgement. So we'd like some feedback on that. We'd also like some review for legacy compatibility. We're not familiar with what all legacy stuff exists out there. So we'd like to be compatible with as much as we possibly can be. We need to do some more cleanup. I'm sure there's some more typos and stuff. And after that, I think we'll be ready for last call. We would like to see it to go to a proposed standard status. But I'm not sure what the working group's feeling on that. There was some discussion about a year ago about going to either experimental or historical. I don't think historical is appropriate, but experimental might be. I don't know. That's it.
I think we're shooting for proposed here, and like I said, we just need participation from the working group to get there. So I don't see any reason to go to experimental at this stage. Anything else that anyone wants to add?